timer if you're wondering what that television screen is. Just a couple of other things. I'll explain the rules as we go along, but basically they're going to have 2-minute openings. I'm then going to pose the same question to all the candidates. Some of the questions came from other delegates. I queried several. Some of the questions came from you in the audience. Some of the questions were proposed by the candidates themselves. You may not recognize the grammar in the question, but we're going to try to get to as many as possible. One other thing I would ask, for all intents and purposes, this process tomorrow is going to decide who the next delegate is representing the 48th. So let's, in that spirit, let's remember that we are all family. Yes, the stakes are high, but let's treat each other, both candidates and audience. Let's treat each other as family. Let's keep applause and the like out of the picture until the end. It slows down the process. We have a lot of ground to cover. I guess that's about it. We're going to do a lightning round, which I think you'll find some fun, where I ask them questions that I expect most, if not all, will have the same answers. Rather than belabor it, we'll blast through those questions. Most of these candidates are relatively unknown in terms of their positions on the issues to the audience. And we think it is important that we cover as much ground as possible. So you will see this, hopefully there will be some media presenting it, not that there's much time given tomorrow, but all of you, most of you are activists, you'll be at these caucuses, and at least you'll be able to share what you hear today. So without further ado, again, thanks to, I know there was a lot of work done by a lot of people on the Arlington Committee, and a lot of people in Fairfax, and they had to negotiate back and forth and everything else. The end result in just a very few days is we are here today. We can thank Bill Howe for ruining our 4th of July weekend. He could have, but it's no surprise considering this is the ringleader of the crowd that wants to keep 400,000 Virginians from obtaining health insurance. So without further ado, if I could ask the candidates to come out, we're going to have them sit alphabetically, and we'll get started. We have a definitive shortage of microphones, so you may sometimes hear me yelling without one if they go over their time. I am going to be a stickler on time. They all know it. They have a timer down to the second, so hopefully we'll keep these things moving. And I'm going to hand it off to our first candidate, David Bowling. Before I do that, let me introduce them all. I realize they haven't been introduced. And please raise your hand. We have Dave Bowling, Paul Holland, Atino Amara, Andrew Schneider, Rip Sullivan, Yasmin T, and Jacqueline Wilson. Without further ado, I'm handing it off to Dave. Dave, you got 2 minutes. Please hand it right down the row, and each of you will have 2 minutes.
Hi, I'm David Bowling. A common thread through my whole career has been public service and fighting for causes that I believe in. I have fought against white-collar crime and corporate greed as a lawyer in the Antitrust Division at the U.S. Department of Justice. I've worked to make Arlington a better place by volunteering at Taylor Elementary PTA, Arlington Committee of 100, Leadership Arlington, and in the Cherrydale Citizens Association. I've helped to open up export markets for American products by representing the United States government in trade negotiations with South Korea, Taiwan, and Japan. When I was a law student, I volunteered in Harlem to tutor kids after school, and I've worked with Habitat Humanity to build a house in the Mississippi Delta. I've promoted justice as a private practice lawyer, where I've not only worked for my paying clients, but I've volunteered my time to help clients who could not pay. I've promoted fairness in my work as a lawyer on the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee by exposing how oil companies and OPEC rip off consumers every day as they fill up their gas tanks. I've worked in a very hyper-partisan environment. As Chief of Staff for a U.S. Congressman, a Democratic U.S. Congressman, and we worked hard to pass the Affordable Care Act. I've worked to elect Democrats here in Arlington, volunteering my time as precinct co-captain at Thrifton Precinct and knocking on hundreds of doors to get out the vote in 2012, 2013, and I'll do that again this fall. I've worked to improve people's health as a health care policy advisor at the state level by creating programs to fight tobacco use and to implement the Affordable Care Act. I've questioned the outsized influence of money on political campaigns, recently in a Washington Post op-ed, and in my current job I promote cooperation and understanding between the United States and Asia with a nonprofit organization. I hope that gives you a sense of my values and my principles.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to George for moderating, and thank you to my fellow candidates. As your delegate, I will focus on my priority issues: the environment, education, transportation, and Medicaid reform. I will also be a strong champion on women's health, gun control, and the rights of the LGBTQA community. I've been a passionate advocate and provided consistent leadership here in Arlington on environmental issues. I've worked with government agencies as a professional, advising my clients on key environmental policy issues, including conservation, climate change, and land use planning. As a citizen, I've been the chairman of the Park and Recreation Commission, where I've worked across the 48th district to preserve open space. I've worked with folks up at Gulf Branch to advocate for longer service hours, and I've worked with folks at Potomac Overlook Regional Park to preserve that as Arlington's wilderness. I've also worked in Roslyn to preserve the open space at the Wilson School. I strongly believe that we need a delegate who knows Arlington and knows Arlington's issues. I'm a lifelong Arlingtonian. I graduated from Washington Lee, and I've also worked on issues beyond the environment. I've been on the Fiscal Affairs Advisory Commission, where I evaluate the county's annual budget and the biannual capital improvement plan, and I've worked on planning efforts in Roslyn, including the Realize Roslyn Sector Plan. It's this community experience and this passion for Arlington that has led elected officials, including Delegate Alfonso Lopez, Chairman of the County Board Jay Fassett, and Sheriff Beth Arthur to endorse me. And if you know my family story, you will know that Richmond is not a foreign land to me. I'm ready to bring my strong progressive values to serve you all in Richmond. I ask for your vote in tomorrow's caucus. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Atima, and as your delegate, I would fight for health care for all, especially expanding Medicaid to 400,000 Virginians. I would be protecting a woman's right to choose, and advocating for sensible gun reform, and advocating for the DREAM Act and immigration reform. As a lifelong Virginian, I am the daughter of African immigrants. Both of my parents came here, my mother on a college scholarship, my father political asylum, literally leaving in the night with the clothes on his back coming to America. In the early years, my parents struggled in rural Southern Virginia, raising me and my brother, who had a disability. We faced our fair share of financial hardships and discrimination, but I wanted to give back a life of service to the country that I now call home. Today in Richmond, we have a problem. We have always been able to have a dialogue across the aisle about how to move Virginia forward. But in the last few years, that relationship has disintegrated. And with Delegate Bob Rank retiring, we are left with a void. I am uniquely qualified to fill that void through not only serving in the local community in such organizations as the Arlington Commission on the Status of Women and Planned Parenthood Metro Washington, but as president of the Young Democrats of America, I have learned how to build consensus between leaders in Massachusetts and Mississippi, which, if you think about it, are not unlike Northern Virginia and Southern Virginia. But I am not afraid to stand up for our shared progressive values, and I look forward to speaking to you today about my issues. Thank you so much.
My name is Andrew Schneider, and I'm honored to sit here before you as a proud Arlington Democrat. I'm a fiercely loyal Democrat, a Democrat who is not only proud to call myself a progressive, but also a liberal Democrat. A liberal Democrat that knows so many of the challenges that we face today as a society that can be solved through progressive and pragmatic government involvement. Things like healthcare and mental health, reproductive rights, strong gun laws, transportation and infrastructure, education and protecting the most valuable amongst us, including our fragile and threatened environment. I'm an FDR Democrat, a Truman Democrat, a Clinton Democrat, an Obama Democrat. And I'm a Warner, Kane, and McAuliffe Democrat. As I said on Wednesday night, service is in my blood, and my blood runs blue. Having said all that, I've spent my life bringing people together, working with diverse groups of people with even more diverse points of view, whether it's leading in my community or in my current job, working with more than 17,000 William & Mary alumni, many of whom are business leaders and Republicans. I worked for the federal government as a civil servant and as a political appointee at the White House. I've raised money for Democrats and nonprofits, and of course, the college that I love so dearly. I even earned my MBA because I wanted to better understand diverse points of view, even if I have found my calling elsewhere. I'm asking you to send me to Richmond not because of my deep ties in our community, not because of my passionate and deep ties to the Democratic Party and our ideals, nor to my lifelong commitment to bringing and working together with diverse groups of people, friends, colleagues, and communities. I'm asking for your vote tomorrow. For all of those reasons, I would be honored to receive it, and working together with you, hand in hand, in Richmond.
What a week. When I spoke to Bob Brink last Saturday, little did I know that 7 days later, I'd be wrapping up a campaign in a firehouse primary, which I quipped on Wednesday evening was really a fire and drill primary. And one voter sort of went up to me yesterday at the Lion Village Park and she told me, well, it's actually a firestorm primary. But it's been a great week. I've enjoyed reminding some voters, and in some cases telling folks for the very first time, of my career-long commitment to issues that are important to all Democrats. Issues like access to justice, ending homelessness and expanding affordable housing, protecting the right to vote, and fighting voter suppression efforts from the other side, protecting our environment, open space, our wetlands and historic places, and working on transportation challenges. And by the way, no other candidate up here has, as I have, pledged to oppose widening Route 66. And I've enjoyed this week because not surprisingly, it has confirmed what I already know. As I've talked to voters, all of the voters of the 48th district, they share the same concerns about a planet that's threatened by climate change. They share the same concerns about our kids' education, overcrowding, over-testing, making sure we have the best teachers making a competitive wage, closing achievement gaps, and getting a fair shot at admission to our outstanding state universities. They share the same concerns about gun violence, the same concerns, we're Democrats after all, about our neighbors who may need housing or mental health services or health care, which is being denied them by a stubborn, unprincipled, even mean-spirited refusal to expand Medicaid. They share the same concerns about a woman's right to control her body and for ensuring equal rights for all of our neighbors. Those are this district's values, those are my values. I want to go to Richmond and fight for those values for you.
Good afternoon. I'm Yasmin Taib, and I'm running to be your next delegate. Growing up as an immigrant, my parents taught me to never take for granted the freedoms and opportunities that our country embodies. Their guidance and the wonderful opportunities that this country offers led me to a career as a human rights activist, and now to becoming a candidate to succeed Bob Brink as your 48th district delegate. My parents fled from war and turmoil in our native Iran when I was 6 years old. My parents sacrificed much by bringing our family to the United States and giving my siblings and me the opportunity to have a better future. They instilled in us an understanding of the principles that have made America great: equality, economic opportunity, and political rights for all. My immigrant background also has motivated me to tirelessly work for comprehensive immigration reform during my professional career. Growing up in an era with humane immigration policies and with the help of wonderful mentors and generous scholarships, I put myself through college and law school. As an Arlington activist, I was proud that Senator Barbara Favola appointed me as a commissioner on the Arlington Commission on the Status of Women, and honored to also serve on the Human Rights Commission. These positions enabled me to fight for the rights of women and minorities. I have worked to support Dreamers against racial profiling and to protect victims of human trafficking. I'm committed to expanding Medicaid coverage and civil and human rights in Virginia. I'm a strong supporter of a woman's right to choose, voting rights, public transit, LGBT equality, and common sense gun safety legislation. Because of this radically short election cycle, none of us have had the opportunity to introduce ourselves as thoroughly as we prefer. I welcome the opportunity to introduce myself today and to explain how my moral compass will guide me to effectively represent you in Richmond. Thank you.
Good afternoon. First, I'd like to thank the organizers of this and as well the Democratic Party that allows a relative outsider to be sitting up here today. I'm Jackie Wilson. To tell you a little bit about myself, I am a moderate centrist progressive. I am a creative solution seeker. I'm a coalition builder, I'm a listener, and I am a leader. I'm experienced in state level government. I have experience as a leader in the military, and I have experience conducting conflict resolution and peace building around the world that I believe could be useful in Richmond. Let me assure you, I am a Democrat. My priorities are informed by my experiences and by my knowledge of the issues and by listening to the 48th District voters and citizens, both Democrats and Republicans. My experience and my interest in expanding transportation options stems from my perspective that that is a quality of life issue as well as an economic issue. My interest in education is informed by my own experience in the classroom as a secondary teacher, as well as by my experience being educated in many different states across the country, attending community college, and recently having completed a doctorate after many years of effort. My interest in healthcare stems from my experience working in state-level government and working on expanding access to healthcare and dental care for the vulnerable. And my interest in gun violence stems from my experience growing up in a household where there were guns, but my father took me at age 14 to receive an NRA certificate in gun safety because he believed that if a house has guns, there should be education about guns. And I look forward to addressing these topics more with you today. Thank you very much.
Sorry about the one microphone, but you got to do what you got to do. Let's get right into it. I saw Delegate Bob Brink in the audience, so I'm going to ask you a question that puts you on the spot a little bit. How do you compare yourself to incumbent Delegate Bob Brink? You can choose the measure, whether it's experience or some other measure that you deem more importantly. Presuming that you agree with Bob on most issues in policy, the real key is where do you disagree? 30 seconds, starting with Dave.
Well, these are big shoes to fill. Bob Brink has done a great job. I can't think of any issue that I disagree with him on. I think that he has been a model of someone who's been able to get things done in his capacity as delegate. He's been a fighter for the issues and the principles that we care about, like expanded Medicaid, marriage equality, and rolling back these medically unnecessary regulations that have been imposed on family planning clinics. So I can't think of anything I disagree with him on, and I think he's been a model legislator.
Thank you, George. I've known Bob Brink for a very long time. I played basketball against his son here in Arlington, and son's got a mean three-point shot. The thing that I really admire about Bob is his ability to get things done, but also to bring a very considerate and compassionate approach to his policy. He's worked well across party lines, but he's also really fought and advocated for Arlington's interests down in Richmond.
Well, I know Delegate Bob Brink well, obviously as my representative, but obviously did work for him in 2009 for one of his re-elections. One of the things that I've always admired mostly about him, obviously beyond the fact that he's been a great progressive ally for us and representative in the Virginia General Assembly, is his work especially in ensuring that higher education gets the funding it needs and being an advocate there. I'm a proud graduate of Virginia Public Schools and 2 public universities, and the rate has gone up since I was a college student, especially for in-state students.
I think the thing that you hear about Delegate Brink consistently when you talk to people, and what I've learned a lot, just even in the past week talking to folks, is that not only is Delegate Brink a great listener, he was able to take those ideas that he heard and bring them into pragmatic solutions. So when I think about things that I'd want to do differently, I know that's one of the things I would definitely want to do the same. Maintain my style of listening and follow in his footsteps of not only being a progressive leader, but that is able to work with folks downstate that don't always see the world the same way we do.
This is an easy one. No one compares to Bob Brink. We are losing an outstanding public servant. What we are losing, most importantly, is 17 years of experience down there. And none of us have anything like that. But I am ready to hit the ground running in Richmond. I have relationships down there. I have been working hard for years building the Democratic Party. I am ready to go. I share the same values as Bob Brink. I can only hope not to fill his shoes, but to at least fill his seat and honor his service with mine.
Thank you. I would have to echo what my colleagues here have said, that Delegate Brink has been a fantastic advocate for the residents of the 48th District. And I agree with him on a number of issues, including LGBT equality, expanding Medicaid, strong, sensible gun control, to women's right to choose. I can't think of a better representative to have for our district, and I hope to continue in his footsteps.
One of the things that you hear about Delegate Brink is his reputation for honesty and integrity. He's able to be straightforward, and he's trusted by the voters of the 48th District, and that's why he served this area for 17 years. So I would like to continue that example of integrity in Richmond, which is, again, required for more effective governance.
Well, it's the first time I've ever done a lightning round on that question and gotten unanimity. Bob, I think they're going to next offer a resolution of sainthood for it. Let's stick to the same theme a little bit. Coming from the 48th District and being a freshman in a distinct minority in the House of Delegates, how would you try to be effective? How do you intend to work with Republicans in Richmond and less progressive members of our own caucus to achieve results while at the same time remaining true to your progressive values? So in other words, how would you go about getting legislation passed in a Republican-dominated House? And this goes to Paul.
Thanks, George. So this is really a process question. I think it's how, as an individual, you approach the issues and how you approach your own relationships with other people. I'm a very even-tempered, considerate, and thorough person, and I think I would bring that skill set to this position. There are certainly issues such as education where I see opportunities that we can work across party lines. Thanks.
One of the things that struck me specifically is that civility is sort of broken down in Virginia politics of the General Assembly because we don't take the time to get to know each other. So one of the big things is, what struck me is that the Congressional Women's Caucus has a softball game across party lines, and they use that time to get to know each other. Certainly going down to Richmond, I would try to find ways to get to know folks offline is what I would say. But, learn about where they are and why they kind of come from where they come from on the issues and find ground for consensus.
I think this question strikes to the core of what each of us hopes to do in Richmond, and while we might agree completely on so many of the issues, this is where we start to think about what individual are we looking for in this position. And when I do this job, I'll do the same thing I've done every single day of my career and my life. It's staying true to who I am internally, but being willing to listen to all sorts of solutions, all sorts of ideas, all sorts of backgrounds and viewpoints. Because if not, how can we get anything done?
I think I can fairly claim, this is an unprecedented situation we're in, but I think I can fairly claim to have experienced something like it when I was a young man. I told this story on Wednesday. I was the head of the organization that got legislation through a Reagan presidency and a Republican-dominated Senate, which created the United States Institute of Peace. It took a combination of commitment to principle, political savvy, negotiating ability, understanding of the other side, and relationship building. I succeeded then, and I can succeed again.
This is a great question, actually. To give you a perfect example of how I would ensure that I'm effective as your next delegate, is I have experience in coalition building and working with members in the Republican Party while I was working on Capitol Hill. For instance, the human trafficking bill that I developed and drafted for Representative Karen Bass was a bipartisan bill that was co-sponsored by our leading representatives from Virginia, including Representative Frank Wolf and Representative Jim Moran, and which ended up getting adopted in TVPRA.
I also have experience working on issues in the state legislative assembly, and that experience taught me a few things about freshmen. One, I saw freshmen come in who thought they were going to change the world overnight. I would study committee assignments. I would meet with senior legislators from the other Democratic delegations, and I would also start building relationships immediately, looking at past bills that have been attempted that have failed, and looking at the different votes and understanding why, and working to address those issues.
Dave, I haven't forgotten.
Three things. I'm very used to working in a hyper-partisan environment. I did it on Capitol Hill, and I stuck true to my principles, and we worked hard to get the Affordable Care Act passed. I've also worked, as I mentioned, as a Department of Justice lawyer. I was not a political appointee, I was a line prosecutor. And so I had to work for Republicans and for Democrats. So I'm used to that environment. That's just part of being a civil servant. And then finally, I would say my family of 6, 3 of us were Democrats and 3 were Republicans. And we had robust discussions at home. I'm used to those kind of arguments and listening to others.
Let's keep this to 30 seconds. I can see it's making you guys sweat. Describe a time when you've led a diverse group of stakeholders, whether in Arlington, Fairfax, Northern Virginia at large, or even at the state level, where you have led that group to find consensus on a challenging issue. And I'll hand this off to Atima to start.
As I said earlier, I've been president of the Young Democrats of America, and so when you do specific rules changes to move your organization, you're trying to bring people from different economic backgrounds, social backgrounds, political mindset in general, together on issues. And so it really is having conversations with people, finding out where they're coming from, and eventually working to figure out how we're going to pass these specific rules within our body for the betterment of the organization. I just finished passing a major rules package where I had to work with getting a diverse representation of people on board.
I think for me, I think about the things that I do professionally, bringing together a lot of different constituencies, even in a tight environment professionally at William & Mary, where we have representatives from all the different constituencies, whether they're the business school, the law school. I also think about what we're doing on Lee Highway, where you have transportation advocates, housing advocates, neighborhood representatives, businesses, and how do you think about all those businesses like they did on Columbia Pike, thinking of a shared vision, and that's what has, I guess that would be my example that I'd like to share with you.
Rarely is anything more contentious than budgets, local, national, state. I was honored when my supervisor, John Faust, appointed me to chair his budget task force, which has wrestled over the last several years with budget shortfalls at the local level. He appointed individuals from all across the political spectrum. I chaired that committee, and consistently we came out with consensus reports on how a local jurisdiction could address very difficult budget issues, and we came to a unanimous conclusion, and I led that.
While working as the National Advocacy Director at the Arab American Institute, one of the issues that I worked on was immigration reform. I had the privilege of working with a diverse group of stakeholders, coalition groups including labor, faith, education, business, such as AFL-CIO, and conservative groups such as Cato. So I have the experience of working with a diverse group to ensure that we push forward on an issue that matters to Virginians.
I had the opportunity to work on an issue that brought on opposite sides the dental hygienists and dentists, with insurers in the center. And the issue was about scope of practice for dental hygienists, which related to their being able to clean teeth without a dentist on the premises. Obviously, this cut into the pocketbook of the dentists, and the dentists were concerned about quality of care and about potential situations that could arise. So we built consensus on situations where dental hygienists could clean teeth for elderly and young students and improve access to care.
So when I worked on tobacco issues and issues of that sort and healthcare issues, we've often had very contentious discussions about how to move forward, how to expand the healthcare to folks, and I've always wanted to try to strike for the middle on these kind of issues, and it's such a contentious issue, healthcare. People see it as such an important part of their individual right, but I worked hard on those kind of issues to reach consensus.
In 2008, I was appointed by the county board to co-chair the Mosaic Park Planning Task Force. We had to balance neighborhood interests and the interests of the single-family homes with the interests of the developers. And through a community conversation, we were able to build consensus and fund the redevelopment of that park entirely through developer community benefit. So very shortly, just a few blocks from here, Mosaic Park will be built at no cost, just through the community benefit to the Arlington community.
Let's move to politics for a couple of minutes, and I'm going to give you a break. This question will be 1 minute in duration. Don't feel like you have to use the whole minute. Republicans control a supermajority in the Virginia House of Delegates. And the 48th is the wealthiest delegate district held by a Democrat in that House of Delegates. 2 of President Obama's top dollar precincts nationally came out of the 48th. 1 in McLean, 1 in Arlington. Having said that, do you believe it's a primary responsibility of a delegate from a safe, blue, wealthy district to help raise money to win back seats for the Democrats? And if so, how would you go about doing that? And if you really want to get specific, what kind of dollar sum do you think is appropriate for you guys to contribute in that vein? And this one starts with Andrew.
I think it's a great question. I'll answer the second part first. When you look at what our fellow Arlingtonian delegates have raised over the last few years, generally every cycle they're raising somewhere between $80,000 and $120,000, and they're donating to party groups about half to 2/3 of that. So I think that's a reasonable amount for an incumbent to raise. In a first cycle, I think what you're going to be trying to do is not only raise money. Dollars are great. I work in development for a living. What we talk about at William & Mary, and what we've talked about throughout my career in helping build communities and building vision, is that you have to have something besides just the ask. You have to make a connection with who you're trying to connect with. If we want to stay inside the 48th district, we're going to be very successful within the 48th district. If we want to make a cohesive case for the majority, a cohesive case for why our vision is better, frankly, than what the other side has to offer, it can't just be about dollars. It has to be articulating a vision to our neighbors throughout the Commonwealth.
George, I'm of the view that a crucial requirement for the person who occupies this seat is to get us back to 51. We need to get our majority back in the House of Delegates. I have done more than my share of knocking on doors, but I am the only candidate up here who has, for instance, formed a PAC, the Blue Dominion Majority PAC, which was dedicated to electing Democrats through innovative techniques around the Commonwealth. I established that with leaders like Anish Chopra and Scott Searle. I was counsel to the Obama re-elect in 2012, protecting the right to vote, fighting voter suppression efforts, and indeed on election day we were in court in Richmond trying to reduce those long lines. I know how to build the infrastructure to help elect Democrats around the state. I've helped do it. And I am committed to using this seat to grow the Democratic caucus. I will not be content to just show up and vote. I want to help Patrick Hope, and Scott Searle, and our leader David Toscano lead us back to the majority. We need to elect Kathleen Murphy in the 34th. We need to find 54 more votes in the 86th and elect Jen Boysko. I'm ready to help lead that effort. And George, are you in for $100?
I'm definitely committed to raising money for the caucus. I think it's exceptionally important for us to get a majority, as my colleague has just mentioned. Some of the things that I would try to do to increase funding and contributions would be, for instance, to engage communities that haven't regularly been engaged in the political process. Communities that are very well off economically, very high education, but haven't been as engaged in the political process, such as the Arab American community and the Muslim American communities. I would also make sure that I do everything I can to encourage my colleagues to help candidates running such as Atif Carney, who ran successfully against Bob Marshall, to ensure that we try to do whatever we can to help our fellow Democrats, our candidates, to get that majority.
Of course, I agree that it's a profound responsibility of a delegate to work toward getting back the majority in Richmond. And I think there are a couple of ways that I would aim to do that. One is to actually reach out to the middle, right? To voters on both sides of the aisle that actually have an interest in democratic values but may not be, or democratic issues but may not be mainstream lockstep democratic voters. And I think it's important to remember that Republicans and centrist Democrats have issues in pro-choice, they have interest in access to health care, they have interest in transportation, and they can be potential contributors on these particular issues. I also think the way we frame the issues is very important in terms of, again, framing them in a way that reaches out to people that may not necessarily be donors. And also, I'm committed to campaigning for other candidates, particularly those who are in vulnerable seats.
I've done a lot of fundraising. I've been on the side of asking, and I've been on the side of getting phone calls. And the most important thing when you make an ask for money is that you have to believe in the cause. And the person on the other side of the phone can tell if you do, and you got to really believe in it. So I know that when you are fundraising, that you have to really believe in the cause, and I believe in this cause. This is something passionate I'm about the importance of getting to a majority. Where do you start? You start here in Northern Virginia with these seats that are trending Democratic, like have been mentioned, Atif Carney's seat, Kathleen Murphy's seat, Jennifer Boysko. We've got to get them over the finish line this cycle. That's where you start, and then you got to spread the field. You You got to go all through Virginia. You got to recruit good candidates. We need a candidate running in each district. That means you're going to have to make the tent bigger and attract some moderate Democrats to run in those rural areas. But we have to have candidates out there to get to 51. That's the strategy.
I absolutely agree with everyone up here that fundraising in this seat is essential. But raising money isn't the only thing to getting back to 51. We need to be out there and we need to be developing future candidates. We need to be looking and talking with future civic leaders and current civic leaders who might have an interest in running for office. And we need to be supporting them with a specific strategy. We need to short, mid, and long-term goals and help them achieve those goals to take back the majority. Thank you.
So I'm definitely the only candidate up here as the president of a national PAC. The Young Democrats of America, while it still works with the DNC, it has its own independent 527 organization and hybrid super PAC. Along with 8 other board members, we spent lots of time raising over $100,000 for the campaign election cycle. I also advocate a lot of times for Democratic candidates, and it's something that I expect to do in this position. Working definitely to talk to people who are interested in giving on the various issues that interest them, whether it's healthcare or immigration reform. Additionally, working with PACs who benefit from actually having 51 Democrats in the House. Those are the only way that we're actually going to ever increase the majority is by bringing a lot of stakeholders to the table and working hard to raise money. I ideally think over 100,000 makes the most sense. I'm very used to call time and never too afraid to hustle for a buck for the cause.
Thank you. I just want to do a little commercial here, looking around the room. You all ought to give yourself a round of applause that there's so many people here on such a glorious afternoon on this weekend. It shows some real commitment. We could ask 100 more political questions, but let's get to the issues. That's where the meat lies. Before we even start on the long-form answers, we're going to move into what I like to call a lightning round. We're going to start with Rip Sullivan, and what I'm going to do is ask a question. I won't even use a mic, I'll just yell because they're short. And all we expect are a yes or no answer, and run them right around. And then the next question I ask will, Yasmin will start, so we'll stay in the order. If you guys get out of it, I'll complain. But these are just a yes or no answer. If someone differs from the rest of the crowd, or if 2 people differ from the rest of the crowd, I'll give you probably another 15 to 30 seconds in that range to say why. But we're going to move quick on this. I want to cover a lot of ground, and we'll start with Rip. Yeah, I want you to. They want to hear you. They don't care if they hear me. Here we go. Do you support a woman's right to choose to have an abortion without any limitations?
Yes.
Most definitely.
Yes.
What? Yes.
Absolutely yes.
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 All right, David, we'll start with you on this one. Do you support marriage equality for all Virginians?
Absolutely. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes. Of course.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right, stay right there with Jacqueline. Do you support Medicaid expansion in Virginia?
Yes.
Yes.
Right now. Yes.
Tomorrow.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Stay with Dave. Do you support the position held by some Virginia leaders to permit oil and gas drilling off the coast of Virginia?
No.
No.
No. No.
Nope.
No.
Almost fooled one now. Stay with Jacqueline. Do you support an increase in the state minimum wage?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I'm going to keep, I know some of these are elementary, but this way the recovery ground is our only opportunity to do this. Do you support equal pay for women?
Yes.
Yes.
Seriously, yes.
Yes.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Certainly.
Stay right there. Do you support Virginia's right to work law?
Yes.
Yes.
It needs some work.
You know, in the long campaign that we've had here, I just want to say I need to look at it more closely, apparently, but no.
No.
I'm on the no, too.
No.
Does anybody want time to elaborate on their answers? All right, we're going to keep going then. Do you believe felons who have paid their debts to society should have their voting rights restored automatically?
Yes, sir.
Immediately.
Tomorrow, definitely.
Yes.
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 Keep it right there. Is Virginia doing enough to combat climate change?
No.
Definitely need to do more.
No. No.
No.
Absolutely not.
No.
Question from the audience. Will you be supporting the entire Democratic ticket in both Arlington and Fairfax in November?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
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 I need to see who's on the ticket.
Okay. Final question. Another local question. Do you support the Columbia Pike streetcar plan?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. This deserves more than yes or no, but yes.
We have a $350 million question here, people, and I will tell you that I support the public and private partnership that the Columbia streetcar arose from. I have questions, like most of the people in the room and most of the people in the county, about how it's paid for. And part of that funding solution could come from the state, but it's a county issue first.
County issue first. We should definitely have a dedicated lane. I support transit, and we should discuss it more, but yes.
It is a county issue, yes.
I have genuine concerns, and I've gone to the county board to express those concerns and have not asked them to kill the streetcar plan. I've asked them to hit the pause button. And I proposed a middle way of moving forward for the next 2 years with the pilot project on bus rapid transit. Let's see what the evidence shows and then decide if we should move forward with the streetcar. But talking to folks in the 48th district, there's a lot of loyal Democrats who share that same concern about the cost of the project. So that's where I am.
Let's expand that a little bit. Let's kind of give each of you a minute to talk about it, starting with Yasmin.
I mean, I definitely think that streetcar is needed. We definitely need more public transit in Northern Virginia. On the issue of transportation in general, what I believe is that we definitely need an increased investment in Metro, an expansion to Dulles, but also I support the expansion of the VRE. I definitely think that by getting more mass transit options, including VRE, Metro expansion, and buses, it'll give people better alternatives to driving.
support increased transportation options because our needs are so diverse. And actually in some of the information about streetcars, we find that it brings different populations into a mass transit option. So I think the more mass transit options we have to get people out of cars, the better we are. I recently had the opportunity to travel to Bonn, Germany, and everybody told me Bonn was a very boring city, but when I got there, it was so exciting to see this combination of bicycles and streetcars and buses and bus dedicated lanes and this variety and very, very few cars on the road. I know Bonn is not Arlington, but the vision of what they did with that city was so powerful. So I think about what could be in Columbia Pike. I also don't question the decisions of those that we've elected to the county council and the decisions that they're making with input, so I appreciate the toughness of their job.
So I'm a big supporter of public transportation. I take the bus every day to work. If you drive down Lee Highway between 7:30 and 8:30, you're going to see me standing out there to take the 3A, the 15L, or 3Y. So I take bus every day. What I would say is that I've tried to be respectful in this discussion about the streetcar and different options. I've never trashed the streetcar. I don't call it the trolley like many Republicans. I recognize that the streetcar has benefits. I have questions, concerns about how much it's going to cost. I think this has become a difficult issue for our community because there are, in essence, two rights that are conflicting. Jay, Mary, and Walter on the board, they're right. We need to be respectful of the process that's taken place over a number of years. But at the same time, we all know that when a project, you're having to pay for a project, you start to pay attention to how much it's going to cost. So it's not a huge surprise to me that this has gotten a lot more attention here recently. Those two rights are conflicting, and we're trying to sort it out.
So, I believe transit solutions along Columbia Pike are absolutely necessary. I believe that improved transit can achieve many different goals, from reducing congestion to improving economic development to preserving affordable housing, protecting and creating new open space, and also funding our school system if we can get the tax base built up. The role I see of a delegate is to advocate for Arlington's interests in Richmond. And those interests are defined by, certainly in a case like the streetcar, those interests are defined by the county board. Should the dynamic on the county board change, then I think as a delegate, my role might have to evolve as well. But right now, I support the streetcar. That's the policy of the county board.
I'm a regular user of transit, and I do believe that what Arlington County has become has been in part because of public transportation. Certainly the Orange Line coming all the way down Wilson Boulevard has definitely grown our county in leaps and bounds. I think that definitely the conversation has skewed a lot. Columbia Pike is a place that is heavily congested, especially in the morning. I can't tell you how many news feeds I get complaining about it all the time on my Facebook about it. But I think definitely we should be looking at what the county board specifically wants to do, and as a delegate, my role would be to advocate for the necessary funding to come back to have a dedicated lane that would cut through Columbia Pike, where we can have something that moves quickly and actually helps to grow the corridor while not affecting traffic at the same time, sort of like the Crystal City Transit Way that we're getting funding and support for. So thank you.
So to me, it's interesting as I've talked to voters over the last week. I've talked to a lot of the people in the room. I've talked to other folks. Haven't talked to you. It's funny how this is almost becoming the Arlington litmus test, and now we've seen it in the lightning round. We want to have a $350 million question reduced to a yes or no question, and think that should be sufficient public discourse because it was part of a plan. As you saw in my Blue Virginia answers, as I've talked to anybody who's talked to me, I'm all for 21st century transportation solutions. The United States is behind the curve in terms of implementing 21st century transportation solutions throughout the country, including in Northern Virginia, including in Arlington, including on Columbia Pike. That means there has to be change. That doesn't mean the plan as written, as yet totally unfunded, has to be approved by all of us, or any of us, with a yes/no answer.
There are two sides to this, of course, and by that I mean two parts of the question. The first is having a streetcar a good idea? I believe the answer to that is yes. It could be actually very exciting in terms of the trans-oriented development it could create in the Columbia Pike area, Crystal City, even in Skyline and Bailey's. It is something I am in favor of and would help to pursue. The funding of it, that's the hard part. That's the hard part. I've suggested that federal funds should be used. We at least ought to investigate awfully hard, try to get some federal funding for this. There may well be other sources of funds, TIF financing, other state and local sources, but the issue is it ought not to be paid for from local operating budgets. It ought not to affect local pocketbooks. And we just need to be creative about how to fund it. I'm committed to helping, to the extent a state delegate can help with these issues, find creative ways to fund the streetcar.
While we're discussing transportation funding, let's move into the issue a little more deeply. I will give 30 seconds on this question. Virginia has been a leader in using public-private partnerships to fund transportation projects. The I-495, I-95 hot lanes, the Portsmouth Tunnel, and the new U.S. Route 460, which runs from Petersburg to Norfolk, are three that come to mind, although there are many others right here in Northern Virginia. My question is, many of those projects were started by Governor McDonald, specifically the US 460 construction, where we haven't dropped a bit of pavement yet, and the Portsmouth Tunnel are currently under review by Governor McAuliffe. Do you think the state's current public-private partnership law has worked well, and what changes do you think it needs?
1 minute. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the question. I have not studied the current law, but I would say in general, I tend to support public-private partnerships. But the part that we need to keep in mind in terms of this question or this kind of decision is what the responsibilities of government are. And for the most part, I believe transportation infrastructure is a responsibility of government. And so when we incorporate a public-private partnership, we relinquish some of the control, some of the values that government has, some of the oversight by the legislature, and in addition, so it distracts our dollars, because there also is a profit motive incorporated into transportation infrastructure. And so for that reason, I think that we need to be cautious and skeptical of rushing toward these kinds of arrangements.
Well, I work at a nonprofit, so I'm very used to the struggles that you have when you're trying to maintain a nonprofit, and the importance of reaching out to the corporate community to support your activities, and reaching out to the government as well for support through grants and such. So this is a struggle that you see in many areas, especially in this age of reduced budgets at the state level, at the federal level, that you're just forced almost to have to work more. And I do think that public-private partnerships offer a lot of potential for us to be able to get projects done that would not be able to get done in the age of such strict budgets and budget cutting. I do agree that you have to be clear what are the responsibilities of the government and what are the responsibilities of the private sector, and you have to strike that right balance, and it's not always easy. And so my sense is that we need to continue public-private partnerships, but with some careful thinking.
So I very much view transportation as a core government function that goes along right with open space and parks. and medical services such as Medicaid. Transportation really is one of those core functions that everyone uses across the Commonwealth. It's public. I don't see public-private partnerships as the answer. I don't have a full grasp on what the legislation says, but certainly it's an issue that I would study, I would look at. I talk to other folks who are in the legislature, have conversations with them, have conversations but with the folks who are affected by the current projects, and do my research and form my opinion based on that research.
Certainly as someone who grew up in Southern Virginia, where people kind of look at you cross-eyed when I tell them I now take the metro and the bus to work, because that's just a foreign concept. I certainly understand that that challenge in Richmond will be to make sure that we're getting the funding we need to improve the system that we have. I think public-private partnerships have always been a creative way to do it. If I had any criticism of it, it might be that they can move faster in expanding our roads and not pick rush hour to sometimes do fixes. But, you know, it is something that, you know, we could do better. You know, yeah, we just could do better at it pretty much, so.
Well, I think we all know that transportation is a core issue, as we heard from the previous question. It's also an economic issue, and it's one of the major drivers that can either advance or slow our innovation economy. If people don't want to come to Arlington or through Arlington or anywhere through the Commonwealth, then they'll go around it. But let me talk about a little bit about the public-private partnership question. I work for a public-private partnership. The College of William & Mary, when I was a student there, took over 30% of its revenue and its operating budget from the Commonwealth. Now it's down to 11%. Private donations have made up that difference. That is a good example of a public-private partnership. But I have serious reservations, because who is representing the interests of the people in each of these examples? Maybe it's okay in transportation, but what about prisons? What about schools? At some level you have to be asking, is this a profit motive or a service or a community motive? And once you see that because of a corporate bottom line, you have to understand the realities of that. So, yes and no.
You know, public-private partnerships tend to have been in the news, as you mentioned, George, because of some big transportation projects. But you do have to remember that there are lots of other opportunities for very positive public-private partnerships. I was involved in some having to do with housing and affordable housing. It is an important part of the future, I think, in these budget times. And I don't see public-private partnerships as a panacea. They're not the solution, but they are surely part of the solution. And we ought not walk away from them. The fact that there are some that have been under some scrutiny simply means we need to make sure we do it right every time. So I guess the answer to the question is, I do support the concept of public-private partnerships in transportation and across the board as we use our imaginations in housing and other areas to do them. But we simply got to get them right.
I would definitely need to look more into the proposals. What I would do is actually I would create a community advisory board seeking advice from experts in our own community and in our own district that would know how this would affect our residents. What I would say certainly is that Maryland, as we know, has taken a lead in expanding more services. And in respect to the Commonwealth, we need to do the same with VRE. While residents in the 48th District have made a small number of commuter train riders, expanded service would certainly expand our green model throughout the Commonwealth and alleviate the level of traffic congestion this region has endured. I will definitely fight to make sure that the 48th District has a seat at the table. I'll call on the WMATA to restructure the board to ensure that Arlington has a principal director without compromising Fairfax and Houston to include it.
We're going to take a 30-second breather while Jim Southworth changes the tape. This whole thing is being shot on video, and he's going to try and have it up on YouTube tonight so it can be shared and more people can see it during that time period. While we're waiting, we're going to stick with transportation on one more question. But
Done.
Okay, that makes it real easy. We've been talking about transportation. The Commonwealth passed, the General Assembly passed the transportation bill in the last session. Many people feel it was half a loaf. Some Republicans voted for it, some against it, some Democrats voted for it, some against it. My question to the panel is such. Would you have voted for the transportation bill, the first transportation bill that was passed in the Commonwealth for more than 2 decades? That's why driving in Northern Virginia is sometimes worse than driving in a third world nation. It's also why some of our Fortune 500 companies are beginning to look and say, do we want to move to Northern Virginia if we can? They have great schools, great quality of life, but if we can't move around and our employees can't move around, is it worth it? So these are very much economic concerns. So my question is, number one, would you have supported the transportation bill? And number two, what will you support in the next session, and where would you seek to get those revenues? Be specific in terms of taxes or other sources. I'll give you a minute each on this.
Well, I applaud the passage of the bill because, as you said, it has been in the making for 20, 30 years and been desperately needed. And I think it is an example that we should be proud of where Republicans and Democrats did come together. There were some very, very tough negotiations to get it passed. But I think it's a great accomplishment, and I think that Virginia should be proud that we finally got to this position. I also applaud Senator Eben and others who did realize that this hybrid tax that was on, or this tax on hybrid vehicles was fundamentally unfair. These vehicles, they don't use as much gas, but they're being taxed higher. And having that repeal was the right thing to do. I don't have a specific plan, if I'm delegate, at this point sitting here, on how to change it. I do think we need to see how it is implemented and watch closely, and then see what happens and how it needs to be improved.
I would have supported the transportation package. I don't think it quite goes far enough, but what I really liked about it was the way it provided more autonomy and more funding, decision-making authority to the local and regional governments and organizations. I agree with David that I don't like the hybrid tax. I myself own a hybrid car and would have been directly affected by that tax. As for next steps, I think we need to look on a regional level at transit solutions and funding transit solutions that can achieve the goals I talked about earlier. Economic development, preserving affordable housing, creating open space. If you look at the history of I-66, when that was created, we had guarantees. We had a guaranteed bike path along that route, and that is used by hundreds of Arlington residents every day. We need to make sure if we develop transit and develop transportation that we're getting community benefits out of those agreements.
I guess I would have voted for the comprehensive transportation package. I too have reservations on the hybrid and energy taxes. I think our Arlington delegation was right in not being happy with that. I think I would definitely be looking forward to working more with the county and the region specifically on increasing access for us specifically in this region along like Lee Highway, where we can increase the walkability score and other ways to make sure that traffic is moving along while there as that area of our county continues to grow, and of course along Columbia Pike. So those are things that I certainly would be an advocate of. You know, it's probably going to take a minute to figure out what exactly is going on with the state budget to exactly pinpoint where I you know, look for money to fund those projects, but certainly looking into sort of state and local and regional partnerships for sure.
Yes, I would have supported it, and I'll tell you why, for 3 specific reasons. First of all, our party leadership supported it. Governor McAuliffe at the time, he supported it. Our residents in the 48th district, most of whom at least at some level rely on a car for their transportation needs, they are a community that will benefit from it. 2, it increases, like Paul said, the autonomy of our region. We hear a lot. In Leadership Arlington, I feel like we spent a whole day talking about the Dillon Rule. And if we're going to talk about the Dillon Rule, we want more autonomy in our community, then when bills give you an opportunity to have more autonomy in your community, you should take them. The third thing, you know, one of the things we've talked about today and on the Blue Virginia questions and elsewhere is Richmond broken? Well, you can't claim Richmond is broken if you have a bipartisan bill that gets a lot of what you're looking for and then you can't support it because it doesn't have everything. I think we do have a lot we still can do. Arterial roads, you know, for commuters like David and I who can't get to a metro station without getting to a bus or 2 buses, that's a problem. And I think revenue, everything has to be on the table, but at the same time, there's a lot of ideas and funding options out there already.
You know, sometimes context is everything, and in the face of the 20-year desert we had walked through on transportation funding, there was no question in my mind I would have supported this bill. Was it perfect? No. And I can understand the position of others who voted against it because it wasn't perfect. But sometimes the perfect can be the enemy of the good. And that would have been my view had I been voting on this last year. It does a lot of great things. I particularly like, as someone else said, I think, the regional tax, the regional dollars that were set up in the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, which, by the way, may well be able to help with a streetcar in Arlington. You never know. So I would have supported it, and of course agree with the general concept. We'd have to talk a lot more about it, about how to get cars off the road, which will help transportation in Northern Virginia and around the state. So I hope that answers the question.
I would have supported it as well. I think the bill was definitely needed. I think that we definitely need more mass transit options, including VRE, metro expansion, and buses. I think it's essential that Maryland, DC, and NOVA work together to reduce traffic congestion and also to increase reasonably priced mass transit options. I will definitely fight in Richmond to ensure that tax dollars that are coming in from Virginia need to be invested in public transportation.
I agree with my colleagues on my fellow candidates that when you're trying to work across the aisle in Richmond, that we have to accept that there will be compromises and give and take, and that as long as we're moving transportation forward, that it would be advantageous to vote for that bill, and I would have voted for it. I think nobody benefits from there being no transportation bill. Protests, boycotts, walking out of negotiations are generally not good tactics. They actually have costs associated with them. In terms of what I would support, you know, the conversation needs to be about determining what is a fair share contribution and benefit for our transportation dollars. And I think additional conversations need to be had with the business sector, right? Because they have an interest in keeping the economy thriving and making sure that we reduce the dead time where we're stuck in traffic where we can't get places that we need to go.
All right. Virginia is currently one of only 17 states that authorizes title lending, car title lending. That's where companies offer consumers loans based on the value of their equity of their automobiles. The last couple of years, we've seen lots of these title loan stores crop up all over Northern Virginia. Currently, car title lenders can lend money at up to 22% a month. That translates into 267% for an annual percentage rate to those who surrender their car titles. These companies tend to lend money to some of the least sophisticated and lowest income residents in the Commonwealth. Some will argue it is the only access to money, to lending, that some segments of our society have. Do you think car title lending should be legal in Virginia? Let's keep it to 30 seconds and we'll start.
I absolutely do not think it should be legal in Virginia. I view it as predatory, and I view it as taking advantage of some of the most disadvantaged members of our Commonwealth. You know, we need to look at other solutions. We need to be raising the minimum wage. We need to have a plan to raise the minimum wage like so many other states have done, and to make economic independence more achievable for the less fortunate in our community.
I absolutely think the Title I lending should be illegal. Predatory loans have specifically greatly affected African Americans, immigrants, those who are predominantly less disadvantaged in certain parts of the state and certainly across the country. I definitely think that we should work toward economic advancement and not finding ways to prey upon individuals who don't have a sophisticated understanding of economics and use it as an incentive to work with banks to find ways that they can actually do good work.
I'm the president of the Yorktown Civic Association, which we have our very own Title Max in. We are not proud of this. We are not happy with it. It is not right. They are illegal in the district. They are illegal in Maryland. So we could potentially be drawing folks from all over the region to take advantage or be taken advantage of with this. There has to be a strategy both in Arlington, talking with our neighbors, but also in Richmond, talking with our colleagues about how we can work on this legislatively. So, absolutely opposed.
This should have been in the lightning round. No.
I echo my colleagues. I definitely think that it should be illegal, and it's definitely taking advantage of some of the most vulnerable members of our community.
I agree with my fellow candidates that this should be illegal. A couple of points. One, it points back to our need for additional transportation options so that people don't feel pressured to have a vehicle to get to work or to medical care. I think it gets back to education, and I'm very happy that we now have economics curriculum required in our schools. And I think it gets to the need for financial counseling, and I've done financial counseling. It's important to give people information about their own budgets.
So, I mean, this sounds to me like the replay of another movie. You saw a lot of paycheck cashing stores that popped up all over the place, and it's really offensive to us, and it goes so counter to our values that you would want to be lending money, in essence, to someone at an annualized rate of 267%. I think we just know in our gut and in our heart that is absolutely wrong. It should not be allowed.
Okay, let's move on to the issue of energy. We're all watching our gas prices go up. We're all talking about climate change. There's a lot of different pieces to this issue. Let's start simple. We'll keep it to 30 seconds. How do you view the future of coal in Virginia? Do you see nuclear power as an alternative? And what other viable alternatives exist?
I definitely see nuclear power as an alternative, and certainly other renewable energy sources. What I do know right now is that things like mountaintop removal are destroying what has sort of made our state a very beautiful state. And so we need to look at ways to build our energy resources without destroying our environment.
In 2005, I had the opportunity to spend a couple of months working for Governor Warner when he was thinking about running for president, and I learned a lot about how he was thinking about his energy policy then. And I remember he said that everything was on the table for him, including nuclear. And I think when we think about 21st century solutions to energy problems, we have to have that approach. I think we have to also, at the same time, realize that the energy sources of the last century cannot be the energy sources of this century. Coal, high cost electricity power, we need to find solutions.
Nuclear comes with a whole host of issues, including, frankly, it's a very expensive way to produce energy. I very much doubt that nuclear is a big part, or likely any part at all, of a long-term solution to our current situation. You asked about what we think is coming. Wind is, frankly, becoming very competitive. from a price and cost perspective. And solar is on the way. That's where we should be putting our emphasis.
I think a lot of us have spoken about the environment and how it's absolutely our duty to ensure that we protect it. I support renewable energy by any means possible. I recognize that there are some non-renewable energies that are necessary in the short term, but any new initiatives should definitely be toward renewable energy. New offshore drilling, uranium mining, and other outdated initiatives should definitely be off the table. I support our Commonwealth investing in new technologies.
So, from my own personal observation, coal is not clean and can never be. I do think nuclear power has value, but we need the safety considerations to be addressed for all of us. In terms of viable alternatives, I support research and development into new technologies. One example is air-powered hydraulic cars, batteries, lighting options, and reducing our use, which would restrict the need for more new energy sources.
I've always thought that if you open up a Webster's dictionary and look at the word oxymoron, that clean coal should be one of the words next to there. So I think the key is that coal, we should not be increasing our dependence on coal. It should be going down, and that we should be looking more towards nuclear power, the renewable powers, that it is just not something long-term that we want to be committed to. We certainly don't want to be increasing it. We've got to be on a pathway to reduction of it.
So I spent my career working for an environmental management consulting firm, and we've grown from 13 people when I started in 2005 to 130 today. Coal has no future because it hasn't achieved anything in the past. What has it done? It's polluted our environment. It's taken advantage of some of the most beautiful parts of our state. They're not the most wealthy parts of our state. They are just very poor, and unfortunately, the money has gone to other places. I'm a strong supporter of solar. We need to innovate in that technology and pursue that.
Let's stick with energy. Nobody mentioned fracking. The oil and gas industry is promoting fracking as the way of the future, as a way to remove vast quantities of natural gas and, quote unquote, help provide American energy independence. Do you support fracking in Virginia? And if so, where? What about the George Washington National Forest?
I don't support fracking, and I'll tell you why. For two reasons. A, it's very debilitating and costly, and it takes your eye off the prize of finding alternative, cheaper, healthier, cleaner sources of energy. The problem with diminishing returns is that as you go down that route, things become more expensive, maybe not in dollar cost, but in real cost, and the return, it's just not worth it. And it does so much damage, so that's why I'm absolutely opposed to it.
And we don't know its effects yet. We really don't. It does take our eye off the ball. The game here is to reduce, always reduce, rather than increase our dependence on fossil fuels. Whatever policy Virginia adopts in response to the EPA's recent rule regulations, they need to be focused like a laser on alternatives. Fracking and other such extraction methods take our focus off of the future.
Thank you. Another question that I think would have been great in the lightning round, but no, I definitely do not support fracking. As I mentioned earlier, as far as energy, I support green energy, support higher gas taxes, support carbon tax, both of which must be implemented humanely by providing better public transportation and appropriate benefits for low income.
I also do not support fracking. I believe that we have to find renewable sources and we have to reduce our use before we pursue options that will destroy our environment. If we look to the future of fracking 20 years from now, we do not know what that looks like. We don't know the impact of the processes, long-term or even relatively short-term. So I think for that reason, we should not support fracking and pursue more renewable and, as I said, R&D of new sources of energy.
I grew up in a town that had a huge international paper mill outside of it, and it brought a lot of jobs. It also brought a terrible odor to the town when the wind was blowing. And that odor became sort of the signature of that town. People referred to it by that. The IP mill was there, and it really damaged sort of the psyche of the people there. And that would be one of my concerns about fracking, and how it would damage the community and the reputation of that community. So I'd be very skeptical of it.
I don't support fracking, and I don't support fracking in the George Washington National Forest. You can see across the country, if you look at Oklahoma, there's been a marked increase in earthquakes, and there's a lot of speculation. I mean, it hasn't been proven, but it's potentially that the fracking that's occurring there is causing these earthquakes. So it's a short-term solution to, and a short-sighted solution to our vital energy needs.
No, I do not support fracking, and I don't support fracking in the George Washington National Forest either. I do believe it destroys our Earth's surface, or Earth underneath. It causes long-term damage, and there are just definitely cheaper ways to get renewable energy. You know, I think many of us remember here when Virginia had an earthquake not too long ago, which is something that doesn't ever happen. My mother was closest to the epicenter and not too far away from an area that does fracking at all. So there's definitely questionable long-term damage to what it can do for us. We need to look at other ways to find energy.
Let's stick with energy a little bit longer, but we'll go a little bit into the weeds. Last year, the General Assembly passed legislation allowing Dominion Resources to recover $800 million in costs to build a future power plant and recover those costs from ratepayers instead of requiring Dominion to recover the money from ratepayers when the plant goes online, hence ratepayers paying for the electricity rather than, and the construction once it's complete, rather than paying for it ahead of time or while it's in progress. The fact is that Dominion could actually choose not to build the plant, or the feds could deny a license to build that plant. My question is, how do you feel about expanding nuclear power in Virginia in terms of supporting, allowing utilities to recover planning and construction costs before those plants go online? And Rip will start this one.
I think my answer, George, is pretty much the same. These kinds of projects, these kinds of statutes take our eye off the ball, so I would oppose such a statute. Our focus needs to be forward. Our focus needs to be on other forms of energy. And supporting in this way traditional, old-fashioned, I'll call them, forms of energy is the wrong way to go.
Thank you. I'd like to actually echo my colleague and say that, as I mentioned earlier, that I support alternative energy, green energy, and I think that this is an initiative that is not going to be in the best interests of the Commonwealth and Virginians.
It seems to me that this decision to allow Dominion to recover $800 million essentially in advance is a poor use of our resources. It's a promise and a prayer, it sounds like, in terms of what we hope we're going to get down the road. And as I understand it, Dominion is a profit-making enterprise, and they should be able to contribute resources from current sales in order to invest in future infrastructure.
I mean, think about what you said. You said to recover the costs from ratepayers before it goes online. That strikes me as getting sort of the cart before the horse, as they say, right? That is just not, that doesn't sound right. And I would say, you know, my years of working at the Antitrust Division as an advocate for consumers has taught me that natural monopolies, whatever type of monopolies, have to be watched very carefully, and certainly natural monopolies have to be regulated very carefully. So I think, again, this is getting things out of order.
So business to me is about risk, and by paying or requiring the citizens of the Commonwealth to pay for it ahead of time, you're taking that risk away from the business and putting it onto the citizens. I don't think that's the approach that we should have for really any business in this Commonwealth. I mean, we need to have the companies who are doing the construction being the ones to bear the risk, and this is certainly the case with Dominion.
I think this is definitely a situation of putting the cart before the horse, and I definitely think it should not be a burden that the citizen carry, but one that the business would, and I know that Dominion is a very powerful monopoly here and should take more responsibility in this project.
The reality is that our Republican friends talk a lot about redistributed wealth. Well, this is exactly the case of redistributed wealth from us to corporate partners or corporate players. It's wrong. Once the plant is built, maybe there's a reason for the cost to go up in our electrical bill. But until then, it's just a transfer, and it's not right.
I have a quick question for the audience. We've covered a lot of ground, but there's a little bit more we can certainly cover, but I don't want to keep you here all day. So let me ask a real quick question. All those in favor of me asking 2, maximum 3 more questions, raise your hands. That's easy, thank you. All right, let's move on to a little bit different subject. Yasmin, you'll be first on this one. The United States has the highest percentage of citizens in prison in the developed world. Since Richard Nixon announced the war on drugs in 1971, the number of Americans in prison has increased by 700%. Statistics show that African Americans are incarcerated at a much higher rate than the general population. Furthermore, far more African Americans are arrested for drug use, particularly marijuana possession, than other groups, even though the rate of drug use among the black population is the same as whites. We have a number of states that permit the medical use of marijuana. Other states, including the District of Columbia and Maryland, have decriminalized possession of small amounts of marijuana. And 2 states, Colorado and Washington, have legalized marijuana. Where do you stand on changing marijuana laws in Virginia? How far would you go and why? We'll start with Yasmin. I'll give you a minute on this one.
Thank you. I would legalize marijuana, and the reason why is, as our esteemed moderator has mentioned, it's disparate effect on communities of color. The usage of marijuana is about the same between whites and African Americans, and as our moderator has stated, the number of African Americans that are incarcerated because of arrest and because of usage or possession is far greater, and for that reason I would legalize.
I would also legalize marijuana. One of the things that I believe is that research into the effects of marijuana has been suppressed for many years because it has been illegal, and so we really don't know some of the effects of marijuana use. And even if there are harms, these are individual harms. And so to imprison people for nonviolent crimes that largely affect themselves and their family, and we don't know whether it affects their productivity and other things, and I think that that's unnecessary, and it has a greater impact on our society in more ways than just the direct crime or the direct criminal. It affects families, it affects our society, it affects budgets that we use to build these huge prisons. So I think that we live in a system, and marijuana use or legalization or criminalization is just part of a system that has very, very broad repercussions. And until it's legalized and we can do research and really understand, we don't know the direct impacts.
When we used to prosecute white-collar crime at the Justice Department, one thing that always bothered me is that frequently the folks that were engaged in this stuff had graduated from some of the best colleges in the United States, and they had used their mind to steal in some way. They had had so many benefits given to them, but they decided to use that in the wrong way, and we would prosecute them, and because it was white-collar crime, they might go to jail for a year or a year and a half. And it was a federal penitentiary. It wasn't so hard. It really bothered me because it struck me as so unfair that some kid who gets busted for marijuana would spend more time in prison. And that has always bothered me, so I would strongly support decriminalizing it because I think it makes our system more just and fair.
So on the issue of marijuana legalization, I'm a wait-and-see person. You know, Washington and Colorado have both recently taken this step, and I think we should have conversations, study the effects, and decide what is the right path for the Commonwealth. I don't see this as an immediate issue such as Medicaid expansion. I think it's something that we can look at in 2 or 3 years down the line. I do fully support decriminalization. I think 700% increase is just completely unacceptable. And as other folks up here have talked about, the disparity between minorities and white Americans is unacceptable. I see the benefits of decriminalizing and making marijuana legal economically and in the criminal justice system, but I'm not quite ready to jump in with both feet. I want to study it and see what the lessons are to learn from Colorado and Washington.
So now that I'm dealing with the Virginia General Assembly, I'd definitely be in favor of pushing a decriminalization with the hopes of moving toward legalization. I definitely would want to make sure that we're permitting the medical use of marijuana, since we've seen the effects that it's had on anxiety and other such illnesses, especially for glaucoma and such. But I'd definitely be very much of an advocate for criminal justice reform, making sure that we have effective rehabilitation programs for those who have suffered from long-term drug use, who are trying to integrate back into society. Great organizations like OAR and Arlington have done great work to that regards. And the restoration of voting rights for not just non-violent felons, but all felons in society. So, thank you.
I'm opposed to the legalization of marijuana. When my kids don't brush their teeth, I don't beat them with a belt. I tell them they need to brush their teeth. So I do believe in decriminalization of it. That said, if we have different proportions of our populations going to jail for the same reason, that is not a drug problem, that is a race problem. That is a societal problem, that is a justice problem. 23% of Virginia's prison residents or prison citizens have mental health issues. Why aren't we addressing those? Because what do many people do when they have a mental health issue? They self-treat with alcohol, with drugs, and then the cycle continues. It's a justice issue, it's a prison issue, it's a punitive issue, but it's not just a drug issue. And that simplifies it and takes the eye, yet again, off the ball of what the real cause of this is. It's a healthcare issue.
I said in response to an earlier question that context can be everything, and politics is sometimes the art of the possible. It's hard for me to see legalization of marijuana in Virginia anytime soon. Having said that, I think it was President Clinton who referred to Colorado and California as laboratories of democracy. I'm not sure about California, but in any event, it will be interesting to see how it works there, and that may well move the needle, even in Virginia eventually. But it seems to me the first step is decriminalization, and I would support that, and that's tied up with reform, sentencing reform, which I'll address in a moment. Turns out, a lot of people don't know that there actually is a medicinal marijuana statute already in existence in Virginia, but it has some problems with it, so that doctors really won't use it. I understand there's going to be an effort to address that in the next General Assembly, and I intend to support that. There's been a lot of sentencing reform at the federal level. We need to do it here at the state level as well.
I think everybody knows about the alleged foibles of our previous governor and the court case that's coming up the end of this month. But unfortunately, we've seen a number of other ethics issues, scandals, and another one that broke only a matter of weeks ago that involved a Democrat as well as Republicans. So I guess my question is, and I'll give a minute for this, are Virginia's ethics laws acceptable and strong enough? And if not, how would you change them?
I actually went on the Virginia General Assembly website to look at the bill that was passed last year in terms of ethics reforms. And my understanding, my research of that issue indicates that that bill did not go far enough. It still allows or opens the door to numerous gifts of numerous sizes to legislators and government officials. When I worked for the governor in Maryland, the person I worked for said that she would not accept a gift that cost more than a cup of coffee. And if she was taken out to dinner, she would buy her meal. If she was taken on a trip, she would buy her ticket. And I think those are the kinds of standards that we need, because when you open the door to $500 gifts or $2,500 gifts, it is a door through which I think it's hard to return. So I think this is my most important issue, and I'm glad that you asked the question.
I got used to very strict ethics rules when I was working on Capitol Hill. There are very, very strict rules about your ability to take a meal from a lobbyist. Basically, you can't do it. And when you travel, who's paying for it? And that has to all be disclosed. And there's a lot of things that you're required to do. Your financial disclosure of your income, all of this. So I'm used to really tough rules at the federal level. I have been sort of shocked at the lax laws in Virginia when it comes to this, as far as gift giving, as we've all discovered through the Star Scientific scandal with Governor McDonald. It just is amazing. And so I would say that Virginia, has had a good reputation for government, but that reputation has taken a big hit over the last couple of years. And that we need to move more towards something akin to the federal regime. I'm perfectly willing to work in that. I'm used to it.
So my wife also works on the Hill, and we every year fill out the ethics reform report. And it is much more thorough than the one we had to fill out as candidates, very much so. And Virginia has some of the most permissive ethics laws of any state in the country. I think someone ranked it the most permissive. And the ethics reform we had last year, it was a step in the right direction, but we need to go further. I personally am very proud of the example that my father set. Former Senator, State Senator Ed Holland, he was a very ethical member of the General Assembly. And I have full confidence that you will not have to have any worry about ethics concerns should I be elected to this office.
In response to the McDonald scandal, and Governor McAuliffe, and to his own personal, I'm not going to accept any gifts like over $100. I appreciate that personal pledge and think that that's something that should be codified into law, maybe not at $100, but some more reasonable price. Because I do think that when you step up to serve in the public, you shouldn't be looking to find ways to get a lot of money out of it. I do think that we have an amazing transparency with the Virginia Public Access Project and its reporting of how candidates receive money, but I also do think that we could have some financial limits. It's a little mind-boggling to me to think that, you could think up to the highest amount of money and that's like legal to give to like a delegate in Virginia. That's never happened, but that could. So yeah.
I think Atima is right that the transparency that does exist is very good, but the law is lacking. So look at us, 7 candidates in a matter of a week who have committed to serving the public. And yet you have story after story of politicians who somehow get it in their head that they are entitled, a sense of hubris, if you will, that they are entitled to something that regular people don't have access to. It undermines the overall faith that we all have in government. It questions the motives of any elected official, whether they are tainted or not. But there is a taint on us all. So I think that's why, regardless of personal pledges or personal moral compasses, that's why there has to be teeth to real ethics reform, so we can all say, so above the fray that it's not even a question. And that's my reason why I support real ethics reform. And that's why I was so offended by the ethics reform that passed last session, because it just made a mockery of us. It said, oh, trust us, this is enough. And it wasn't, and it's wrong.
I view the reform, let's call it just the statute that passed last year as underwhelming, but at least a start. I think everyone up here recognizes that it hasn't gone far enough. The governor has committed to work to strengthening it in the next session, and I look forward to working with him. I also want to give out a shout out to Senator Eben. Adam, where are you? I thought I saw you. Adam. Unfortunately, Adam tried unsuccessfully last year to add some teeth to some other areas of this bill. Thank you for doing that, Adam. Thank you for trying. As I understand it, it would have, seems common sense to me, applied the disclosure requirements for immediate family to all children, whether or not they actually live in your home or not. Seems a no-brainer. Wanted gifts that lawmakers extend to others to be reported. Seems a no-brainer. Wanted the state's new ethics council to approve all travel gifts valued at $1,000 or more to be trips that are educational, informational, or beneficial to the Commonwealth. Seems a no-brainer. Adam, I hope to help you get it through next time.
Well, I'm glad that something passed this session. It's certainly not strong enough. I, as a first step, would like to see a cap on Virginia political contributions. I would also support, as mentioned by my colleague, Senator Adam Evans' proposal that would call for pre-approval of free trips, meaning that if you're going to be getting a free trip, you need to demonstrate to the ethics board that this trip, in fact, benefits the people of Virginia.
Okay, I'm going to do 2 quick lightning round questions. First one will deal with the death penalty. Virginia is one of the states that still allows the death penalty. We've actually got quite a history of executing people here, not quite as much as Texas. So my question is simple. Do you support the death penalty? And if you do, we'll have a follow-up question.
As a former prosecutor, I've seen this a lot, and no, I have very, very deep reservations about it.
I do not support the death penalty.
I do not support the death penalty. It's been wielded and used specifically to discriminate in society, and I think we need to make sure it's abolished.
I'm fundamentally opposed to the death penalty.
I am against the death penalty.
No, I do not support the death penalty.
I oppose the death penalty.
Hold the mic right there. Same thing, lightning round. Do you support a Virginia version of the DREAM Act to help the sons and daughters of immigrants, many who attended our public schools from the time they were in kindergarten to seek a college education?
Absolutely, they're the future potential of our part of the future potential of our state?
Yes, absolutely.
I do. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes, and I applaud Alfonso Lopez's leadership on this issue.
I think we've held these candidates long enough. I would suggest that just as we saw in the crop of candidates who ran for the 8th Congressional District Democratic nomination, that Arlington, Alexandria, Fairfax, in fact, Northern Virginia is blessed with having options that many of our fellow Democrats in other parts of the state do not have. Therefore, it's straightening for a candidate just to put something up there. Meanwhile, we have a whole process just to decide between a number of good candidates. For the final piece of this, we will have each of them provide you with a 1-minute closing statement. They're free to talk about anything they choose.
So why am I running for delegate? Basically, I want to make a difference, and I want to help bring the values and principles that you share with me into legislation and to make it better for Virginia and the 48th District. I want to fight with Governor McAuliffe for the Medicaid expansion. I think it's a tragedy this is not happening. I want to fight with the Attorney General for marriage equality. And I want to fight for the DREAM Act, as we just talked about. And also, something we haven't talked about is to work to reduce this crushing burden of student loan debt that so many young folks and families have to struggle with. But I'm not only running for that reason, I'm running for the future. And we've talked about it, to build a Democratic majority. I want to put the Democrats more on the offense. Our delegation does a great job, often playing defense against the Tea Party Republicans. We need to go on the offense. We need a majority. I have a plan for that.
I'd like to thank my fellow candidates today, and thank you to George for moderating this debate. We're all running here to replace Bob Brink, and throughout his 17 years of service, Bob has been a fierce advocate for progressive values. He believes in the effectiveness of government, and he has a strong moral character. And to realize his belief and his strong moral character, he's worked with our elected officials to represent Arlington's interests in Richmond. He's helped bring resources home, and he's been a great listener and done his research and approached this position with a thoughtful and conscientious manner. I believe that I can bring a similar perspective to Richmond, one that is inclusive, thorough, and effective. My values will guide me as I serve you in Richmond. I hope I've earned your endorsement today. I hope I've earned your first place vote. If you're supporting one of these other fine candidates, I ask for your second place vote. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm a lifelong Virginian. I've grown up in the southern part of the state, and I live in the northern part of the state. I very much appreciate the opportunity that I will have with my husband to raise a family here. And growing up in Southern Virginia and seeing the quality of the public schools that I had, and going to the University of Virginia and competing with my Northern Virginia classmates, I had a lot of catching up to do. And so I think it is something that fundamentally I will be an advocate for, and making sure education is funded. It was endorsed by Delegate Rob Kopika. I'll be working with him definitely on those efforts. I'm going to be a personal advocate for Medicaid expansion. I have a younger brother with a disability, and I've seen his quality of life affected by the Medicaid hours that were cut by Governor Bob McDonnell. I will be an advocate not only for raising the minimum wage, but a living wage. I am a graduate of Leadership Arlington in 2014 because I definitely want to understand more about how I can effectively serve this community. And I will work hard to make sure the House Democratic Caucus has what it needs to make sure we have representation across the state.
I feel like we could have done a lot of this debate by the lightning round. We agree on so many things. So what sets each of us apart? What sets me apart? I'll tell you 3 reasons why I want to be your delegate, why I would be honored by your first choice vote tomorrow. And it's these 3 reasons. Every day I'm in the trenches of serving our community. whether it's a civic association president, nonprofit board member, or in my community or my professional job, working on behalf of an institute of higher education. I want to put my passion that I have and put my values into action on behalf of you. That passion and my ability to effectively communicate that passion to diverse groups of people and advocate on behalf of diverse groups of people is what sets me apart. And the third thing is, my roots and my values were shaped in this community. I went to Yorktown High School. I went to Overley Pool. I coached at Donaldson Run. I'm of this community, and I stand for it, and I will stand for it in Richmond. All I ask is that you stand with me, and let's do this together.
Ladies and gentlemen, you will not find and you cannot elect a delegate more into responsiveness and access than I. All of you got my mailers. I gave out my cell phone number, and frankly, a lot of you used it. I am into access. You will be able to be in touch with me. I told you about my values as I began my comments this evening, and my priority will be to take those values and represent them and advance them in Richmond on behalf of all of the 48th District. On Wednesday, I talked about the elephant in the room. If you were there, that elephant is my address. I'm going to mix my metaphor and tell you it's not the elephant in the room, it's a red herring. It is a red herring. Just less than a month ago, Arlington elected an Alexandrian to represent it in Congress. Jim Moran, of course, has lived in Alexandria his whole life. Barbara Favola represents half a district of Arlington, half a district in Fairfax, and no one in Fairfax believes she does anything but a fabulous job of representing our jurisdiction. The fact is, I know the values of the 48th District, and I will represent those values in Richmond on your behalf. I ask for your vote tomorrow. Thank you very much.
I want to thank all of you for coming today. The Arlington Fairfax Democrats, Senator Adam Evan, and the other community leaders who have endorsed my candidacy, Moderator George Burke, and my fellow candidates. Although this election cycle does not serve any of us well, this short election cycle, I hope that I've demonstrated to you tonight, or today, this evening, my commitment, my expertise, and my strong desire to represent you effectively in Richmond. As a 6-year-old immigrant, I dreamed about making life better, and I came to love the United States and all that it stands for. As someone committed to public service, representing you in Richmond will empower me to fight for the opportunities that Northern Virginians value. I respectfully ask for your vote tomorrow. If you've already selected a candidate, I would be honored to be your second choice. And whatever the outcome tomorrow, I promise to continue to do everything possible to fulfill the ideals that I've outlined here today.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for your time and attention. It's a most impressive exercise of the democracy for all of us to be here today on this beautiful afternoon. I believe that I offer you a very different set of experience. Each one of us is unique in our own way, but I come to you with experience in the classroom as a teacher, as a member of the military, and as a mother of 3 adopted children, in addition to my experience as a peace builder. And the way that affects my ability to govern in Richmond is that I understand the need to reach across the aisle. And I understand that negotiation does not mean compromise. It is a way to achieve the issues, the values, the way to address your concerns while working with others who may sit on the other side of the aisle who have the same concerns that you did. I'm committed to governing responsibly, with integrity. I'm committed to governing with collaboration and with humility. Thank you.
I thank all the candidates, but first I have a request of the audience. You were all here. You saw these folks answer not questions that they chose to answer, but questions that were posed for them. Hopefully it's given you at least a broad brush feeling about where these different candidates stand on different issues. The problem is the caucus, and ostensibly the election, is tomorrow. So I think it's important, and I suspect the candidates think it's important. I know the parties in Arlington and Fairfax think it's important that as many people as possible vote. because it's the 4th of July weekend, because the time frame has been so compressed, you all have a responsibility to spread the word. Certainly you can spread the word about the candidate of your choice, but just as importantly, you have to spread the word that there are caucuses tomorrow and that people can walk in the door, cast their ballot, and walk out. It's not a 5-hour process that they have to sit in or get locked in or anything else. It'll literally take 5 to 10 minutes of their time. And I can assure you, I will make you this promise, there will be no lines at the polling place in Fairfax or in Arlington. So you need to be messengers. And we appreciate your participation as an audience. And certainly, again, I just want to reiterate, I think we have a pretty darn good stable of candidates. Now, Bob Brink's seat or shoes are hard to fill, but I suspect we have some candidates here over time that would certainly do a pretty good job of trying. So give them one more round of applause. And I'm going to hand this over to Nick Malinowski, and again, thank ACDC and ACDC for putting this together.